everybody, my name's Helen, and today I have some contemporary recommendations. I wish I could say that these were books that aren't necessarily well known or that a lot of people don't read, but that's not the case. They're fairly well known, but they're awesome. They've all made it onto my favorites shelf on Goodreads. Some of them sit on my favorites shelf here at home, and I just want to share them with you because if you haven't picked them up, these might be some reasons for you to try them. So the first book I'm going to recommend to you today is Stargirl by Jerry Spinelli, and this is just such a heartwarming little book. It's about a girl who calls herself Stargirl, and she comes to this high school, and she's very weird and outgoing. She's never been to an actual public school before, she's always been homeschooled, so this is very much who she is, and it's her kind of dealing with peer pressure and high school, being the person who people think she should be. I had never read this book, and so my friend gave this to me for Christmas. I really liked it. It's a great story, especially for people who can relate to being kind of quirky and weird and being an outcast, and I highly recommend this. The next books I'm going to recommend to you are a trilogy, and they are The Summer I Turned Pretty trilogy by Jenny Han. So, of course, the first book is The Summer I Turned Pretty, then It's Not Summer Without You, and finally We'll Always Have Summer. I just realized that those might not have been in frame as I showed them to you, but oh well, we're gonna go with it. These books follow a young girl named Belly, and she and her family go vacationing at this little beach house every year with her mom's best friend's family, and she's always been in love with the one son, but he's never really paid her any attention, and then this year she's beautiful, and so it's her kind of dealing with the new attention, and she starts off really immature, but she grows as a character so much throughout the series. Like, I loved this. And it's something that seems like it's going to be light and fun, but then has some pretty heavy subject material in them, so it's just a really surprising, really well written, really good story. If this is a series you're not entirely sure if you want to commit to, because when you put the three of them together it's quite chunky, then at least pick up The Summer I Turned Pretty, because Jenny Han will not disappoint you. The next book I'm going to recommend is a fairly recent read for me, and I read it with my book club on Goodreads. I'll make sure to link it down below so that you guys can join us if you would like. The book that we read was How to Love by Katie Cotugno, and this book is beautiful. It follows Rena, who has a 2-year-old daughter, and she is 18 years old, I believe. And Sawyer, who is the father of the child, was her boyfriend 2 years ago, and he just disappeared. And she found out she was pregnant very soon after. And she's been raising Hannah by herself, and 2 years later, Sawyer comes back. And this story takes place in kind of dual perspective, in the before and the after. So you get to learn how she and Sawyer got together originally, and then you get to see how everything is impacting her life in the after. This was just such a good book. The writing was fantastic, the characters were flawed, and it was lovely. It's a little bit chunky, it's like over 400 pages, but I read this in like 2 days. It's so good. So good. And the chapters in this are mostly really short, so they're really easy to read, which is nice. And just, it showcases a really interesting dynamic because Rena's from a very religious family, so you get to see how they deal with her teen pregnancy. Teen pregnancy is just something that's not discussed very much in YA fiction, and I really appreciated that in this book. And the next books I have are another series, but this one is a duology, and it is To All the Boys I've Loved Before and P.S. I Still Love You, again by Jenny Han. Jenny Han is just a fantastic contemporary writer, and these books are so good. They follow Clara Jean, and every time she's in love, she writes a letter, but she never sends it, she just tucks it in a hat box and throws it in her closet. And one day she comes home and all of her letters have been mailed out, so she has to deal with the repercussions of that. I found with the first book that it takes about 50 pages or so to get into it, but then after those 50 pages I could not put it down. It was so good. The characters are all kind of different, which was nice. I've never read a character who is as innocent as Lara Jean. Even though she can be annoying at times, it doesn't take away from the overall enjoyment of the series, at least it didn't for me. P.S. I Still Love You was a fantastic continuation to the series and a great ending to the duology. great books. Now I have 3 books who are not part of a series but are all from the same author, and that is Rowell. So the first book is Fangirl, and then there's Eleanor and Park. So Eleanor and Park is a little cute contemporary love story taking place in the 80s following Eleanor, who is this kind of over-the-top, flamboyantly dressed, tomboyish kind of girl who has a really shitty home life, and Park is just kind of this quiet boy who's really into comics, and his mom and dad are, well, his mom is pretty open-minded, his dad is a little bit too traditional. They kind of are forced to sit together on the bus one day, and slowly they start interacting, and just watching their relationship form was really fun and really cute. And then of course there is Fangirl, which follows Kath, and she and her twin sister Ren are going to college, and it's Kath trying to deal with not being a twin for the first time in her life. She's really into this series called Simon Snow, and she writes fanfiction for it, and she meets Levi, who is just, Levi is great. This is one of the most relatable books I've ever read. Rowell does the fanfiction world justice. She doesn't look down upon it, and she doesn't hype it up. She just looks at it from the perspective of someone who writes it in this book, and it's lovely, and it's just so great to read. The next book I have is If I Stay by Gail Forman. I haven't read Where She Went yet. I'm really kind of just tired of Adam, so I don't want to read the one from his perspective. I loved this one. I loved how you got the flashbacks, her life before the car crash, and that you still got to get attached to all these characters like her mother and father, and then when you got back to normal time it would kind of hit you again that they're dead, and you've known that they're dead since the beginning. This was just really good. I'm not a fan of the ending. That's the only thing I did not like about this book, but I really enjoyed it as a whole, and Gail Forman's writing is beautiful. I read this in one sitting. Like, it's really easy to read, really quick to read, and just a really captivating story. And the last book that I have to show you today is actually probably the only one that's not as hyped in the booktube community, although the author is pretty well known, and it is 13 Little Blue Envelopes by Maureen Johnson. And I read this, it's probably been 6 or 7 years. I should reread it because I loved this book. This book was about a girl, and her grandmother died and left her an envelope. And when she opens the envelope, it has these instructions for her. It has $1,000, and the instructions are to buy a plane ticket. And she follows the instructions through all these envelopes, and they lead her on like this scavenger hunt. And this was just really great, and now I want to reread it. So maybe that's what I'm gonna do now, because this is probably one of my all-time favorite contemporaries. If you haven't read it, please give it a chance. So that's it. Those are all the recommendations I have for you today. If you have read any of the books that I mentioned in this video, please let me know down below so we can talk about it. I absolutely love hearing from you, and I respond to every comment on my videos, so there's that. I'll see you soon with a new video. Bye!